Hello everyone and welcome back to our next analysis video. Today we're going to talk about the only B-side on Ar Tonelico 1 concert side Blue, Singing the Stars Hoshiyomi. Hoshiyomi literally translates to stargazer. Now in the game, Misha is called the star singer, but the actual Japanese term used for her is Hoshiyomi or stargazer. And in our note search, the term stargazer is used as well. So this is just a quirk of how Nisa decided to translate her title and how the ramifications that had on this song and as Koei Tecmo took over the series after the main Ar Tonelico trilogy was completed, how that affected the rest of the translation. Now, this song actually is a pair. There is Playing the Moon, Tsuki Kanare, on concert side Red. And both of these are B-sides. One is Shigata Akiko's B-side for Misha. The other is Shimotsuki Haruka's B-side for Orica, and these complement each other really well. They both are very traditional sounding, using traditional Japanese and Eastern instrumentation. They also both have the same core themes being played. If you look up the translations were done in tandem. Both contain the lines talking about songs feeling mysterious and being mysterious. So it emphasizes the power of melodies and that songs are mysterious because they can reach our hearts in different ways. So both of these songs have that same meaning. Since these songs never appeared in the game, there's really no context besides just this is Misha's character song for her being a star singer or stargazer. Could also be and in the lyrics of the song there are references to stargazing, which does also support the idea of this being potentially translated more correctly to stargazer rather than star singer. Now, because Ar Tonelico is a song about music, is a game about music, and Rivatel's are singers, it makes sense that Nisa would have wanted to translate this to star singer as she is, singing songs. Specifically, she's singing Chronicle Key in the Crescent Chronicle. So, labeling her a star something, star singer, makes sense in the lore, even though it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes when translators do their translations, they have to decide, is this a literal translation? Is this word for word what this means? Or does thematically, based on context and jargon and colloquialisms and slang and references and puns and everything put together from their culture, does the translation make sense to twist it slightly so that instead of taking the one-to-one literal translation of stargazer, does it make more sense in lore to be star singer, because that is what a Japanese person would have actually read it as, even though the word and kanji literally means stargazer. It could go either way. The person that I'm conferring with to double check some of my translations is actually considering, when doing retranslation projects, to alter this to be stargazer, but whether that thematically fits the theme of Ar Tonelico is something that us as players who are experiencing the story will have to decide. Literally, that is what it means. Thematically, that is what he believes, and I will, he has done a great service for the Ar Tonelico community. But it is, Nisa obviously had a different idea. Not that Nisa was right. Nisa has made a lot of flaws in the Exapico series, as well as in a lot of their other IPs that they have brought over and translated. But just to let you know, translation is not always about the one-to-one translation. And so as much as I would support either interpretation, I just want to make you aware that the literal and canonical translations are technically different here, and it is about what you prioritize. It's kind of like the honorifics or no honorifics debate, or what order you want to put the names in, first last or last first. Those are all cultural things that when you translate them literally, they don't have necessarily a direct English translation, but the thematic, you can keep that thematic lens still to hold. So that is why I want to mention that as part of the translation of the song title and the words throughout the song and how it reaches in through the series. So again, this is Misha's song. And so Misha is often connected to themes of the star, as I mentioned, with her being the star singer singing Chronicle Key in the Crescent Chronicle. And so in this song, we're going to have a lot of motifs about nighttime. Because of that's when the stars come out and we can see the stars. Now, what's interesting is usually when we talk about contrasting contrasting sides of a coin, for example, yin or yang, the moon is paired with the sun. But here we're pairing the moon, which is Orica's song, which we'll get to on Concert Side Red, with the stars. So there is no sun. Now, there you could say that perhaps Shirelli represented the sun, but there's no song to go along with that. So that could be an interpretation where there just isn't another B-side because they didn't want to have two B-sides on Concert Side Red to pair only with one B-side on Concert Side Blue. Especially because they could have given Shirelli a B-side, but then they'd have to give Claire a B-side, and they, that's two songs now instead of just one to put on, and so there are probably considerations with that. But it is worth noting that we're pairing two nighttime types of things, the moon and the stars, rather than pairing a nighttime and a daytime. So nighttime, is thematically linked with things like mystery and secrets. And clouding our emotions. And so it's really interesting that that's what these songs are about, is about how songs bring out these emotions. And that songs are mysterious because, again, they can reach our hearts in different ways. So that's why thematically it makes sense that both of these are included with those nighttime motifs rather than having a night and a day, perhaps, motif. So Shirelli may not have been ever meant to be paired with the sun because you would have lost that mysteriousness, that opaqueness, that, that confiscating it, obfuscating, that's the word, it underneath that layer of the nighttime sky. All right. So, like I said, there's not a lot of context. I don't have sheet music for this because this is a B-side. I didn't listen to it right away when I was first going through these songs. So we are going to talk about it as we go along. So I have just a standard clip of it here. For the whole song. Know that it is very traditional sounding. Both of these two B-sides are very traditional Japanese sounding. This features the mandolin, the ocarina, and the erhu. Two of those are stringed instruments. The mandolin and erhu are stringed instruments. The ocarina, we all know from Zelda, right? But a traditional ocarina isn't always played, like this. Sometimes it's actually more often played like this. And in ocarina time, it's that glass ocarina. Ocarina are often clay. But the idea of an ocarina is it's a high-pitched wind instrument, and so that will definitely come through. The mandolin and erhu are more traditional string instruments. The mandolin more like a lute-like, guitar-like, where the erhu is more upright. I think it's upright violin. I don't really recall. I'm not an expert on instruments. But I know those are what the instruments are, and all three of those are heavily linked to Eastern music in general. And whether the music comes from China or Korea or Japan, these instruments actually are played differently. In one of these songs, as I was doing my research, I don't remember if it was this song or Playing the Moon Tsuki Kanade, but the instrument used in that in one country they plucked with their fingers, where in another country they used a pick traditionally. Now you can play an instrument any way you'd like, really, especially now since a lot of these lines between how do you really play an instrument is blurred. Common example is the violin and a fiddle. It's the same instrument, but whether or not it's played one way or another, that's how you tell the difference between do you call it a violin or do you call it a fiddle. In here, the instrument's called the same thing, but it's just played differently depending on the origin of the country, the music, the source of that playing style is coming from. So I just wanted to note that there. So even though these are traditional Eastern instruments, they are played and they do sound a little bit different depending on the country of origin. And since I'm not an expert on that, I don't want to make assumptions that these are the purely Japanese style of playing, but certainly it would make sense as these are Japanese songs. Okay, so this song is in 6/8. We're going to start with an intro. We have a very standard intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, etc. Very standard progression of parts to the song, very unlike Harmonious. But we're going to be in 6/8 the whole way through. We are going to have quite a few key changes. We're going to start off in G sharp minor. intro, so I'm stopping before we get any vocals because I want to note this is a long intro, especially for an Ar Tonelico song. Most of our ex aequo songs that we'll talk about throughout this series, and certainly the ones that you talked about, have been very vocal focused. Here it's taking us 47 seconds to even get the first vocal line. That's the song is 5-6 minutes, so really in the grand scheme of things, it's not a whole lot, but there's also going to be an instrumental break later on. So a good quarter of the song has no vocals at all. So this is definitely an anomaly, part of why it works as a B-side rather than as a, image song for the to sell the game. But I also want to mention that even within this 47 seconds, there's a good chunk of it with no instrumentation, but more with sound effects. Both this and Tsuki Kanade Playing the Moon focus very highly on atmosphere over the actual instrumentation of the song. So you had that cricket sound, right? Crickets are standard Japanese hack of saying this is a sunny summer day. Now, certainly we're talking about the night sky. So saying it's a sunny summer day doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is the stereotypical image that and it's you see it in anime a lot. You see and you hear the cricket and it's summer, it's after the school's out, or it's after school or on a weekend or something, and they're out in the fields playing in the countryside, right? Higurashi no Nakukoroni is a great example where we see this a lot. So it's evoking that atmosphere to kind of show we're talking about this mysterious summertime, that we're going to get more of a feeling rather than a message. And so that's what that's trying to evoke there. And the instrumentation really supports that. We have a very traditional, that's the erhu coming in, very traditional musical line there. The backgrounds, we had a few little pops, just of almost like a synth choir in the background, to kind of give more of that atmosphere without being distracting. But then we're going to get into the verse where we're going to stay in that G sharp minor. Before we go into the pre-chorus, because I do want to talk a little about the transition that's currently happening, so I'm going to back up just a tad. Might have been too much. The melody line is much more simple than a lot that we've heard. In the second half, when the main melody repeats in the verse, we get that harmony line. And I mentioned this is in G sharp minor. Now, you may say, but this sounds so happy, this sounds so pleasant and content. But if we actually plunk out the melody, we are actually ending on that G sharp. We're starting and ending the melody line, each line on that G sharp. So we're starting and ending on the tonic. Now the major key that goes along with this scale, the major key that goes along this scale, which we can find by going 3 half steps up, would be B major. So if we plunk along, we're like, okay, so where does B actually appear in this melody? And it does. Right at the very end. So actually it appears right at the beginning, but we barely hit it and we go off. Sorry, I'm playing it by ear. But it also hits at the very end. As a transitional note that we're stepping away from that lower part and going back up to our tonic. So even though this song sounds like there's contentment and almost happiness, it is still in that minor key. As I've mentioned, just because a song may sound happy doesn't mean it's in a major key. Oftentimes, a majority of the time, a happy song is still in a minor key because a major key is just sounding too overbearing. It's too happy, it's almost artificial sounding. So with very few exceptions, many songs, even happy songs, are going to be in minor keys, and that's okay. That's just a musical convention. It makes sense, and you can write a melody around a minor key where the melody may sound happy, even if the chords are not necessarily happy. So it works just fine in this case. Now, the reason why I backed up a bit is because I want us to pay attention to this transition into the pre-chorus. This is a very interesting transition into our pre-chorus. Now, the pre-chorus is in a different key. It is in the key of A minor. So G sharp to A is a single half step. It would be perfectly natural to just move, because we're right next to it, you just move it, just like how sometimes in pop songs, you sing a chorus and then you want to elevate it, so you step up a half step or a whole step and you sing it again, right? Super natural, no transition really needed. It's built in. We, as listeners, we understand it. You're right next to that key anyway. It makes sense to move to it. But this song actually uses a chromatic leaning into this. We're going to go down a few steps and up a few, down a few half steps and up a few half steps. We're going to go up and down a bit, and then we're just going to settle on our key. Totally not necessary from a musical standpoint, but it makes you go, oh, something's really changed here. I'm not just elevating it, I'm giving a whole new feeling. And so it does emphasize that key change a lot more than just switching to the key, which again, would have been perfectly fine to go from G sharp minor to A minor. Totally could have just done that without any transition at all. But because we're emphasizing it, it sounds much more pointed, and we notice it a lot more strictly. So notice how the chords are going up and down a little bit very closely until we settle in for the pre-chorus. And again, because I just hit the left arrow going back a little too far. Here it is. Was a key change again. We're changing into the key that the chorus is in. So we changed, then we had an A minor, and then now here we didn't have a transition, we just jumped to C minor. Now A minor to C minor is not as natural of a jump. That's where I would expect to see a transition, because we are moving we're moving 3 half steps there to get to our new key. It's not an adjacent key anymore. It is, so A minor and C major are adjacent keys, but we're changing to C minor. Now, I'm going to asterisk that, and that could be potentially why no transition happened. We are transitioning to C minor, but we're going to end the chorus in C major. We're going to do the same thing that Harmonious did at the end. A lot of Ar Tonelico songs do this. I warned you last time, Chronicle Key did this, Harmonious did this, and yet now we have the third song on one CD that's going to do this. This time it's not going to be at the end of the song, but at the end of the chorus, we're actually going to make that C a C major. And that could be why Shikata Akiko felt there wasn't really a need to do a transition, because she's just transitioning to the corresponding major key, even though she's keeping it minor for a little bit. If you actually plunk out the notes, you still have you still have your B flat, E flat, and A flat within this melody until the very end when we raise that minor third up to a major third on the chord. So perhaps she was just playing around a little bit with the scales and the chord progression to kind of, make you think like, wait a second, and then by the time you realize it, wait, I've ended on a major chord. Was I in major the whole time? Then of course I didn't need to transition. Just some really, really intelligent work to make you think. And by the time you realize it, you realize what she's done. And the course is over. So then you hear it again the second time through and you're like, I know what's going on here. But just to know, so we had partway through the pre-chorus, we had that transition, and that was just a jump transition. And we're going to stay in C minor throughout the chorus till the very end, when we're going to raise that minor third up to a major third. That's how, I sang that poorly because I wasn't trying to be loud, but we've gone to that C major chord now. So that is what I'm trying to do. We end it, even though we were in a minor key, we had the B flat, we had the E flat, we had the A flat in the melody, we end that on the major key. Something else I want to point out here, and then we'll continue on. I can't remember if the chorus is doubled or not this time around. She has something what's called a trill. Or a slight run. Usually when we think of runs, we think of, Christina Aguilera style, like, like over the top, just like going. But a run is really going back and forth between any note and hitting any notes in between. Doesn't have to be adjacent notes, just I'm hitting notes in between two notes in any way I want to hit them. And so she goes, melody. That's a run because she's transitioning from melody. And she's hitting some notes, melody. But we technically call that type of run a trill. I'm not sure where that came from. When I think of a trill, I think of like a flute. I used to play the flute. I think of a flute doing a trill, like where you're going in between two notes. But that's really what she's doing. So she's taking that. So she's going E flat, D, C, and then instead of going back down, she's repeating that D, C, B flat. So she's doing a little mini trill. If I'm using my sheet music to block the sun and it's not quite working, but if I pull the sheet music down, I can show you it's even worse. I can show you what this symbol is. It's a very interesting symbol. If I can find it in here somewhere. I think this book has a case with a trill. God, it's got a bunch of everything else in it. I might be thinking of my other book. Okay. So here is what happens in music when you have a trill. So you have these three bolded lines that go, and it's saying these are the two notes you're going in between. You have your starting note and you have your ending note. And whoever you get between them is totally fine. Usually when we do this as musicians, we're usually really boring. So here's my start note, here's my end note. We usually just do that. We're usually pretty boring, but you could, because then you have to think about what notes are in the key. I'm gonna put this back up here. But that's musically what's going on and what she's doing. Now, part of the reason why she's doing that is for ornamentation. That's the most common reason to introduce a trill, but it's also to add a little bit of tonal color. So usually when we add tonal color, we add vibrato. I've talked about that before, how Ishibashi Yuko has the most beautiful vibrato. She knows how to use it. She knows how to make it very full when she wants to use it. Shikata Akiko rarely uses vibrato. When she does, it's very thin, almost like it's unintentional. Mitose Noriko's vibrato is almost uncontrollable, as I've mentioned, and Shimotsuki Haruka doesn't have any vibrato at all. So both Shimotsuki Haruka and Shikata Akiko do this sometimes, where they add these little trills or ornamentation to almost make up for the fact that they can't do the vibrato as strongly as the others. So they add this type of ornamentation instead of vibrato. But when you add a trill, you don't add it at so usually vibrato is at the end of the line, the last note in the line, or a longer note of the line. Whereas trills work really well in transitional parts. You can't do it at the end because you're not transitioning to anything new. And if you do it during too long of a note, you just get a messy run, like, again, Christina Aguilera has done. So you do it on these faster moving parts. And it really sounds like there's a lot of technique behind it, and there's not a lot of precision there, to be honest, because you're hitting notes you've already hit. You're just bouncing back and forth between some of them, and you're going so fast that if you're slightly sharp or slightly flat, honestly, you won't be able to tell. So it's a really smart way to add a very, very simple layer of complexity without having a lot of stakes attached to it. Not saying that they are sharp or flat; they are absolutely not. Especially on this song, the notes are right on pitch. But I'm just saying, in general, it's a really smart way to add some extra flair with, like I said, very low stakes to it. So that's what's going on there. Okay. Right, second half. Okay, and we're getting into the instrumental break. One thing I want to mention, two things. So we're having a key change. We're actually transitioning to a major key. We're transitioning to D major. It could definitely be the corresponding minor key of B minor, but there's not enough evidence actually in the melody. It sounds like it wants to resolve to D, so I just picked the major key, especially because we're coming off of the C major, how it went to the C major at the end of the chorus, both the first half and the second half. So I'm assuming we're keeping the major. It really just depends on, how she got the ekiko thought the melody was meant to resolve here. But so there are so there's two halves of the chorus. I paused after the first half, and so we just heard the second half of the chorus. So half of the chorus, at the end of the first quarter and at the end of the third quarter, the melody was pretty similar to the rest of the chorus, but instead of ending on the ending note, it fell off it and went down. So that is a very simple way to say, hey, I know it sounds like I'm done, but I promise I'm not done. There's more. I'm resolving it so the line is over, but I'm unresolving it so the chorus isn't over. Very standard thing to do in music. You hear this in pop music all the time. Really, really great transition trick, especially too. I've heard this used to go from pre-choruses to chorus or verses to choruses as well. It's basically just a sign saying, hey, I'm resolving it because my line's done, but there's another line after that I want you to hear, so I'm unresolving it right away. Very standard. And then we're moving into, we had a little bit of a choral transition there where we did the key change. So we had our transition, the key change, and now we're going to have an instrumental break. The instrumental break is going to be primarily the ocarina on top of the background. And that's where it sounds certainly like it's in, again, D major. Could have been B minor. Again, just where do the notes fall? Where's the chord where the chord pattern falls? Because I didn't plunk out the sheet music. I'm not 100% sure. How does it seem to resolve? We're coming off of a major chord. We are going to transition back to the verse after this. We are going to transition back to a minor key. So you could argue this is in B minor, not D major. Totally fine call. I don't have a strong opinion on this one, whether this is a major or minor key, unlike the verse, pre-chorus, and chorus, where I do have strong feelings based on how the melodies are resolving. And that in the background's the mandolin. We have a transition into the G sharp minor, and the transition was very simple because D major or B minor, however you want to interpret it, and G sharp minor are not adjacent keys. They're not really related keys. There was a little bit of a single chord step in between. We had a chord from the D major / B minor key. We had a chord from another key somewhere else, and then we transitioned into the verse. And it certainly felt like there was a difference. Unlike some other cases where a transition feels natural and you don't need to preclude it with anything, this one you could definitely tell something happened. We had a transition chord in the middle. And then we went back into the verse 2, very stereotypical standard verse from earlier, just repeating it again, no harmonies. We added a bit of piano at the end of the bridge leading in, also building up towards, hey, we're coming back to a part of the song you recognize, leading into it so that we are ready and our ears are ready to be more familiar with it, but nothing out of the ordinary here. Otherwise, the verse really works the same way. We're going to have that same transition into A minor again. But the pre-chorus is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have that A minor. We're going to have that transition into C minor. And then there's going to be a change. And I want to note we didn't have that chromatic modulation, that walking back and forth, going from the verse to the pre-chorus. And my hypothesis on this is, first of all, it's the second time we're going through the verse to pre-chorus, so we don't need to point out that transition. We know it's going to happen. Again, it is a half-step difference between the keys. You don't need a transition there. It musically makes sense to have it. My third hypothesis and reasoning behind why I think why they changed the transition is because they wanted to emphasize this next part, which is literally like 2 lines later. So you have a key change, a key change. So you're having 2 things that are already disrupting your listening experience a little bit, but the tension is supposed to be on the new part of the pre-chorus here right before the chorus. And the reason why we're introducing a new part, so we've had this beautiful, pleasant instrumentation. Vocals have always been 1 or 2 lines with some la-la-las in the back. I'm going to talk about those at the end of the song. But we really haven't had a lot of layers of vocals, at least not layers that we've meant to really pay attention to. The layers of the la-la-las are more instrumentation-like. They're not serving a focal purpose. They're serving a, hey, I'm supplementing the rest of the song purpose. We've talked about that before, where sometimes the vocals are a focus, sometimes the vocals are serving a rhythmic purpose, sometimes they're serving a purpose of moving the song forward, sometimes they're providing the backing chords for the songs. And so that's what it's doing here. It's providing that instrumentation, it's moving the song forward. But here we're actually going to have layered vocals and nothing else. We're going to bring everything away and we're going to focus just almost like we're back in chronicle key or harmonious. We're going to have, it's a very short part of the song, and it's going to lead us into the final chorus. And so songs sometimes have a little bit of a extra build up to the final chorus, which is sometimes why you have a key change before the final chorus, right? The final chorus is your last hurrah. It's like, hey, the chorus is the big part of the song and we're about to do it for the very last time, everyone, so pay attention. That's pretty much the purpose that this is serving. どこからか聞こえてくる懐かしい調べあなたの名前はメロディー心つなぐ光 Really? Did you like it? I'm glad you liked it, Yana. Do you want to get down? So, the reason why I paused there is we're about to get to the outro, so we're about to get to the very last part of the song, but I wanted to note that, like I said, this is the final chorus, the last hurrah, the pay attention everybody, part of the song. And so you notice even in that last part of the chorus, we only played the chorus, by the way, once instead of twice like the first chorus we had. But we emphasized it a bit. We added extra layers of harmony, those extra layer of harmonies above to be like, hey, this is the last line of the chorus, everybody. Isn't this awesome? And also, it really emphasized that major chord ending of the chorus because we added more notes to that major chord in the actual vocal harmonies. So certainly they were in the vocal harmonies before. By adding more layers of that and more notes throughout more octaves, we went from maybe to, right? So it really emphasizes that and makes it louder. Even if it's not mixed louder, you're layering more vocals on. They're going to come out stronger than other things because now you're taking that focus away from other instruments or other parts of the song that are playing at that time. And so now I want to talk about the ending. So the ending is where I'm going to talk about the la-la-las. So throughout the song we've had these, and I've mentioned that we're going to talk about it now. So we've had la-la-las here and there. Many of them have served as background elements to move the song forward or add a little bit of rhythm. Because this song, you might have noticed, it has a very sway feeling. And you notice I was doing do-do-do-do-do, a very waltz-like drum beat with my cat's paws. Don't worry, Yenna will put up with anything. She puts up with our preschooler, so she'll put up with anything. She's the young cat. The old man cat would have run away. But it has that swaying, waltz-like feeling. So the la-la-las are adding kind of like a, moving, like instead of, you're not falling asleep going do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and this is getting boring, the same thing over and over. The la-la-las are adding some extra texture, adding some extra pieces of rhythm in the background so that 6/8 beat doesn't get stale. Because that's what can happen with 6/8. And 6/8 can be a really powerful time signature because you can do a lot of great things with it. You can emphasize the first and fourth beat, which is what most songs tend to do, like this one. You can try to subdivide it and do 1-3-5. That's really hard to do properly. You end up just sounding like you're doing do 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 do, like a 2/4 or something. You can start to layer it with adding or subtracting beats to like do 6/8 and then have like a measure that's 5/6. 5/8 or a measure that's 7/8 in there. A lot of progressive metal tends to do that. But if you just play straight 6/8 the whole way through and you have a very, one of your standard beats, it can really, because of that swaying motion, really put you to sleep, no matter how exciting the song is. And I like this song a lot, as I like almost all this Ar Tonelico music. I'm trying not to let my bias come through with individual songs, but certainly, like, I'm not saying the song's putting me to sleep. I like this song. But just by nature of it being 6/8, you need to have something else to go along with it, or some differentiation, especially for a song that's, nowadays, songs nowadays, if you look at pop songs, like I listen to some K-pop, the standard song length is under 3 minutes now. And here we're almost at 5. Attention spans are getting shorter. And so in order to keep your listening attention span, you can't just have that do for 5 minutes. You just can't. It's not going to happen unless you're putting someone to sleep. So regardless of how you feel about the song or not, something has to be added. And so that's what the la la la's are doing. Now at the ending part, so in all those places the la la la's are background. But here what we're going to have is the chorus is done and we're just going to have those la la la's come out and be our main focus now, our main melody focus. Now I was calling it the main melody is a bit of a misnomer. We're basically removing the melody and seeing what is left, you could say. But the la la la's do serve a purpose. Whenever you have a la 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 in the song, its purpose is, we've had parts of songs before where it's meant to sound like a community feeling. When we talked about singing hill harmonics earlier, we talked about, the singers maybe approaching the microphone from different directions, and that's why you heard things in different parts of your earbuds or your headphones. That is a way of generating a community feeling. La la la's can also generate a community feeling. They're called vocables. It doesn't have to be a la la la. It is usually a la la la. It can be anything, any like ooh or ah, anything that's a very simple thing to sing along with that doesn't require you to memorize lyrics is generally what a vocable is. The idea is it's something that's easy to say or easy to sing. It's a nonsense word or phrase. It's meant to be catchy and easy to get into. So in here, we're talking about the feelings of songs and how songs are mysterious because they can evoke feelings in us. And so like, what feelings are you feeling? Why don't you sing your la la la's with me and share your feelings and get your feelings into the song too? And so that's what the purpose of the la la la's are for here. So in another way you could also think about, so that's one way you could interpret the la la la's. Another way you could interpret the la la la's is it's a song within a song. So she's singing about singing a song, and here's the song she's singing about singing is the la 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 la's. So we're going a little bit meta, but we're taking lyrics away because we're not going to put lyrics inside lyrics, because then you're just getting into metaphors, and are those parts of the original song or are they something new? So that's a second interpretation of why there's a vocable here. It could be you're sharing your emotions with your songs and singing along with her. It could be this is her singing the song that she's singing about singing. Either way, I think is a valid interpretation. And then what's going to happen here is we're going to bookend. So we started the song with crickets and we're going to end the song with crickets. And I think this really ties the piece together because, as I mentioned, this song is more, especially compared to other Ex Pico songs, more about atmosphere than vocals. So that's a very different focus, whereas usually our Ex Pico songs are more about vocals, and the vocals are creating the atmosphere. Maybe not about atmosphere, but the vocals are creating the atmosphere. Here, as I mentioned, there's a good good quarter of the song that the vocals don't even appear. We have that intro, we had that instrumental break in the middle, and we're gonna have a little bit of the outro. So we're creating that atmosphere again. It's also going to fade out. Now, I have mixed feelings personally about fading out. Oftentimes I think a fade out is a way to say, hey, I don't know how to end a song, so I'm going to fade it out so I don't have to. And many songs do that. That's just the truth of the matter, is if you don't know how to end a song, you can fade out and you've ended a song. But what's happening here is very different. Yes, it's going to fade out, but it's going to fade out towards that cricket sound. So the entire thing isn't fading out. Just the music part is fading out. You're still going to have that atmosphere left behind. So it's not a full fade out. And the music also is fading out so that maybe you can follow it somewhere else. It's mysterious, remember? So it's fading out and like coercing you, hey, can you follow where I'm going? Or perhaps she's going off to sing the song that she's singing about singing, right? So there's two ways you can interpret that fade out that make it seem more purposeful than lazy. I I can't believe anything in an ex-Pika song could ever be considered lazy with how much thought and time is put into it. So I think those two interpretations make a lot of sense when we think about what a fade out is, because otherwise there's just too much going on in these songs to think that a fade out could be what it could be. Now, sometimes songs and games do fade out. And it's not for laziness reasons. It's because the song is meant to loop. And so there's really never an ending put on the song because you would never hear the ending in game. But we have known that that's not the case here, because Chronicle Key, Mishra's Purger, Exact Harmonious are all songs that we've talked about that have looped in game, but still have a definite ending on the CD. So that is not a reason why a song would fade out. And this is a B-side. The song doesn't even appear in the game. So that would not be a reason why a song would fade out. And there's too many songs for me to think about right now, but I can't think off the top of my head on the spot here. I have notes, but these aren't scripted. I can't think off the top of my head of a song in the ex-Pika universe that just fades out because of it being looped. Go listen to a Koji Kondo soundtrack if you want that, because I just think of the Legend of Zelda soundtrack I have on my phone. That's a classic example. Everything loops, and so all the songs fade out. None of these concert side songs fade out. The soundtrack songs. If you go to the soundtrack, we'll be talking about soundtrack songs after we do the two concert sides. We'll do the two concert sides, then soundtrack songs, because we need to talk about the Cosmosphere songs and Song of Paired Lives. Those do fade out. So that's another example where, because they're not on the concert CDs, they were never meant to be standalone, listenable like these are. And so those fade out simply for the purpose of no ending was ever needed to be created. So why spend the time thinking of it? No one will ever actually hear it. But this is a B-side. We can hear the ending, and the ending works. And we end with the cicadas. It is a summer night. I record these in the evening after my son goes to bed, and then I upload them during the day. So it is a pleasant summer night here. So I'm going to go and think about how songs are mysterious too. How about you? What do you think about Hoshiyomi singing the stars? I don't know why I closed VLC. I don't know why it's still showing up like it exists, but it doesn't exist anymore. So what are your thoughts about our first B-side? This is the only B-side we're going to talk about on Concert Side Blue, because it's the only B-side that has song lyrics. There are two other B-sides that we're not going to talk about. So we really only have, I think, one more song to talk about on Concert Side Blue, and that is Ishibashi Yuko's second song. What's really interesting is that's the first song you hear actually in a normal playthrough of kind of. It's the first full song you hear in the normal playthrough of the game. You technically hear 2 lines of Rig Veda when you first start the game up. But we're going to ignore that because we're going to save that for Concert Side. But the next song we're going to hear, which is the last song of this CD, is the first song that you actually hear during a normal playthrough. So that's really interesting. So we're going to bookend this with the first song. But what did you think? What do you think of the message of the song? Look up the lyrics and tell me what you think. How do you think, if you've heard Tsukikana de Playing the Moon, how do you think this compares and partners with that song? And certainly I'll ask that question when we go over that song as well. So shorter video today, but I'll see you next time.